Hey folks, how's it going? Dr. Spin. So the album I'm looking at this week is an album by an artist named Holly Herdon, and I discovered it this summer. The album is called PROTO. I discovered it through a Pitchfork review, and what really caught my attention about this album is that Holly Herdon, who's a pretty established electronic artist, she's been doing laptop work and other computer music for several years now. I think this is several albums in for her. But on this album, she created with her collaborator and partner Matt Dryhurst. They created this AI, and they call it Spawn. It's their AI baby, apparently. And this AI Spawn is a collaborator on the album. And I read that point in the review of the album. I really find it fascinating. Now, I know that she's not the only person that's doing AI work with music, but this is one of the first times I kind of had really heard about it. And Holly's approach that I had kind of briefly read about intrigued me, so I followed along into it. And the first song I ran across was this song called Frontiers. And Frontiers caught my attention almost immediately because it really reminded me of like really classic 80s anime soundtrack, like something out of the Ghost in the Shell or something. It's sort of like I could perceive its sort of integration of technology and humanness. Herndon describes the album as a sort of a document of live vocal processing and folk singing that she's using, and she feeds into this AI Spawn. And even after listening to the album for a while, the process by which she uses Spawn, the way that the Spawn AI, the role that it plays in the album, it's still very difficult to parse out on and of its own because the whole thing is integrated into this huge whole. In the process of making the album, I can tell you, because there's tracks on the album that document this, she spent quite a bit of time training the AI in these various kind of styles of music. The AI would record these things and then sort of process them and play them back. You know, although she was very conscious not to really give it like a physical avatar or try not to anthropomorphize it too much, she often refers to the AI as an agency in and of itself on the album. And this process by which she live trains the AI has a couple of spots on the album that are documented. So there's one here that I kind of want to share with you. Here's what I hear happening here. I hear the choir singing a passage, and then I hear the AI Spawn singing back its interpretation of what the choir did. I don't think, and if anybody knows more about this than I do, please let me know, because I'm fascinated by this. The Spawn AI isn't just like recording and playing back. You know, if you listen to it in that way, it would seem like a kind of inefficient, because it's not playing back exactly what the choir is singing. But what it is doing is recording and taking it in, and then playing back its understanding of the rules of those passages. And you know, then your mind kind of spirals out of control, and you think, well, it's trying to learn the music theory. I think the music theory behind it is kind of part of it, but I also think that it's listening not just in terms of like the way that the pitches run, but also like timbre and tone and volume, and all these things are these aspects of music that we kind of take for granted. The AI is kind of ingesting and making it part of its own kind of rule book for the recordings. in some of the interviews, Herndon's very adamant to make clear that this is in no way automated. It's not just playing things back. It actually ended up being a very unpredictable collaborator in some ways, because she wasn't always sure exactly what kind of reactions that the AI spawn would have whenever it would be involved in these sort of collaborative experiences. But she saw the AI as part of the ensemble. But the spawn AI is looking at sound, in this case, using sound as material, not like MIDI files as notes. But the overall sounds that it gets and interprets, it's using as materials. Many of the compositions from Proto give you the impressions of like huge shimmering lattice works of architecture. They're vast and reflective and shiny, and they have all these facets to them. If you start listening very closely to some of the melodic material in there, it's not just sounds. It's like aggregated collections of a broad variety of vocals and sounds and everything else. It's ground down to almost a microscopic level to create the sounds that are happening throughout the album. And the Spawn AI on Proto, as I've been reading more about it, sometimes takes a bigger role on some compositions, on some tracks than others. There are certain tracks on here that certainly are tentpole songs. Alienation is one, Frontiers, Eternal. Those kinds of songs are kind of like to me, the most effective collaborative songs on the album. And then there are other pathways we go to where we see more of the source material. We see more of how the AI makes its voice heard on the album. So there are some criticisms out there that the album seems uneven, but I think actually the album is very transparent. So there's this interesting dichotomy on Proto where you feel like there's these sort of transcendental, ethereal songs that are very, very ecstatic. And then on the other hand, you have these very anxious, restless songs. And I find that balance between ecstasy and anxiety on this album is very reflective of the way that we interact with computers today. And I think that is kind of partially intentional. A lot of Holly Herdon's work is as much art as this commentary on the role that human beings and technology have with each other. And she's kind of fighting against this like cyberpunk post-90s dystopian idea of what AI will ultimately do, the effect that AI will ultimately have on humankind. In her view, having an AI, having Spawn there, gave her the capacity to make the album more communal than her previous efforts. More people to be involved in a way that's more equal, to have more voices involved. And the AI was sort of like the centralized hub where all these various artists' voices contributed to the final project. And that to Herndon is the bigger point, that, while on the one hand, we have some anxiety about our relationship to technology and the role that it plays in our lives. On the other hand, technology has the capacity to actually bring people together more. And that balance is something I think that she's attending to on this album. And also the subtext too. If she's able to feed this AI Spawn a variety of different kinds of music, and it can react in a way with some agency, what does our interactions with being online and our virtual selves, what kind of AI is that feeding? Because certainly it's feeding some kind of AI. Is it creating a relationship with an AI, an end result that we don't even see? Who knows? Probably so. Does that give us cause for anxiety? Well, perhaps. And perhaps also, it's ironic for me to talk about this in the venue of being online, having an online persona myself. But I also think that avenues like this have the potential to bring people together. That is the part of the internet that's the blessing part and not the curse. So I tend to embrace that view of technology, kind of like the communal spirit that Holly Herdon invoked in the making of this album. Ultimately, there's a sense of collective humanity that's preserved in the process of writing this album. And I think that you really can't feel that any stronger by the just general sense of yearning that this album seems to exude. And I don't know that, I'm comfortable with the idea that computers can yearn, but certainly people can. So if that's the message of this album, then that's great. Really, ultimately, the album is a fabulous work of music that's worth checking out more and more. And its deeper philosophical implications certainly can be both unsettling, but also can be uplifting if you open your mind to that idea. So that's all I got for this album on this week. Please tune in next week. We'll have another one for you. Until then, I'll catch you on the flip side.